Have you ever wondered if the Bible has something to say about the prosperity code? Have you ever wondered if it were possible to generate so much wealth that you don't have to worry about your family, you don't have to worry about bills, you don't have to worry about what you're going to eat, you don't have to worry about your children, you don't have to worry about your generations yet unborn? It will interest you to know that the Bible has some really, really powerful truths to share that can really change the game for your finances. And in today's conversation, we are going to be unpacking the secrets that helped a man who was a slave in a strange land to generate wealth in his 30s. You see, wealth generation has always been something that many people have always been interested in. But the sad truth is that people go to the wrong sources. They go to all the wrong sources for insights, for information about wealth generation. Now, in case you're wondering, who is that guy who generated wealth in his 30s? Who is that guy? I'd like to meet him. Well, I'm going to introduce to you the man who goes by the name Joseph. Joseph was a slave who was sold to slavery by his own brothers, and despite the fact that he was sold to slavery by his own brothers, he unlocked the prosperity code, and that helped him generate wealth, massive wealth, not just for him, but for his family, for his unborn children, and for his generations to come. And today, I'm going to be sharing with you some really, really powerful insights from Joseph's blueprint that will change the game for you, for your wealth, that will change the game for you as far as your finances is concerned. Now, in order to kickstart this, I would like to say a few things about prosperity, because there's a lot of misconception about prosperity everywhere you go. There's a lot of misconception about prosperity in the world, and there's a lot of misconception about prosperity even in the church. And so let's get this started. You see, prosperity does not come by wishing. Prosperity is a practice and it's a programming. When your creativity solves real problems, then your life stops waiting on permission. You stop waiting on permission from your friends, you stop waiting on permission from your family, and you start allowing your creativity to gain expression. Now, there's a few things I want to tell you about Joseph that really going to interest you. Joseph did not accomplish what he accomplished just by mere dreaming or by mere wishing. Neither did Joseph accomplish what he did or generate wealth the way he did just by status. Joseph did it with creative intelligence. He did it with creativity. Joseph learned how to interpret dreams. In other words, Joseph knew how to analyze data. He knew how to play with data. He knew how to make sense out of data. And that's basically what Joseph was, right? Even though the Bible clearly tells us that he knew how to interpret dreams, Joseph was a data analyst to the core. He knew how to interpret dreams and make analysis, draw out an inference, come up with a conclusion based on the data in those dreams. So Joseph was basically a business analyst or a data analyst who knew how to read in between the lines to find hidden secrets embedded in dreams. And I would like to refer to those dreams as data, sources of data, petabytes of data, right? And so that's simply what Joseph did, and that set him up for massive cash flow. But apart from the fact that he was great at interpreting dreams and reading data, there are some really key things that Joseph displayed that we can actually draw from studying Joseph's life. But before we go into studying Joseph's life, let's talk about poverty for a while. But before we go deep into all of that, let's talk about poverty for a while, because poverty is endemic in the systems of society, and many people are running with the poverty mindset without knowing. In today's conversation, I'm going to expose some of these poverty programming traps that you probably have fallen for and that's running your life. The first thing I'm going to tell you about poverty is this: poverty is not a lack of resources. Poverty is a lack of creativity. And I'm sure that should not be a surprise to you anymore, because if you've listened to me well enough, you should have heard me say that time and time again, right? One day I put out a post on my WhatsApp status, and I did an inscription on that design, and I put it on my status saying, poverty is not a lack of resources, poverty is a lack of creativity. And as I imagined, people began to respond, people began to react. How can you say that? How can you say this? How can you say that? And then I engaged one of them, and he told me, how can you say poverty is a lack of resources, or it's not a lack of resources, when I have great ideas, I have creativity, but I just cannot make anything out of it because I'm from a poor background. And then I stopped him right there and I said, hey, if you recognize that poverty is a problem that's stopping you from achieving your goals or fulfilling your dreams or living your dreams, you have identified the problem quite all right. But that's not all. That is an occasion for you to display creativity. Creativity is your ability to solve problems. So if you say and you claim that you are creative, but what's hindering you is your lack of resources or poverty, then you are truly not exercising your creativity. Because if you truly exercise your creativity, you will figure out a workaround. You figure out a way to generate income. You figure out a way to overcome poverty using creativity that God has blessed you with. And so after that conversation, that person was able to understand that, hey, poverty is not a lack of resources, but a lack of creativity. And for you listening to me today, maybe you are listening to me and you feel like you are unfortunate in life, or you feel like things are not working for you, and you feel like you're stuck. Well, God has placed in you the seed of creativity, the seed of fruitfulness. And that's why he said, be fruitful. He didn't say be seedful. He said, be fruitful, multiply, replenish the earth. What is that seed that God has dropped inside of you? As long as it remains buried, then poverty will remain your friend. As long as it remains untapped, as long as it remains unplanted, as long as you keep eating your seeds without putting it into the ground for it to germinate, poverty may just remain your friend. But the moment you wake up and take advantage and take ownership of your destiny, then you're on the path to prosperity, massive cash flow, massive wealth infusion. Now, another thing I want to tell you about poverty is that poverty is not an accident. You know, many people think that they were poor by accident, but the truth is that poverty is a program. Poverty is a program. What is a program? A program is a set of instructions that have been repeatedly suggested to your mind and has now become set in your mind. It has now formed the better part of what we call your mind set. So you have now been programmed to think in a particular way that keeps you stuck, that keeps you broke, that keeps you poor. And when you have that mindset, no matter what you do, no matter what business you start, no matter how much capital you have, you will still struggle. You will remain stuck like chalk in a pickup truck. Another thing I want to tell you about poverty is that poverty punishes passivity. In other words, there's no neutral ground when it comes to poverty, right? So you cannot be passive and expect to experience prosperity. You have to be active about it. You cannot sit down and keep your mouth shut and expect to be wealthy. You have to open up your mouth and speak in rooms where you would be heard. Speak in rooms where people that needs to listen, people that needs to hear you will be seated looking for answers. And that was what Joseph did. When it was time to speak, he always spoke. Whether it was speaking to his brothers, whether it was speaking to his colleagues, whether it was speaking to his bosses, whether it was speaking in the palace, he had the presence, the executive presence to always speak for himself. Right now, I wrote something down. I said, if you don't control your time, attention, network, and skills, poverty will. There's no neutral. You are either compounding creative capital or depleting it. Now, one very important breakthrough I got when I was, trying to deprogram myself from the poverty mindset and program myself with a prosperity mindset is that time is not money. I know that we were taught in schools that time is money. We've listened to songs that time is money. We've read books that tell us time is money. We've listened to sermons that told us time is money. But guess what? Time is not money, right? Time is infinitely more valuable than money. If you lose money, if you lose $20,000 today, you can make it back. If you lose $500, you can make it back. But if you lose time, You lose 1 hour, 2 hours, 3 hours, 4 hours, 5 hours, 10 hours, you can never recover it. It's gone forever. Time is an irreplaceable and unreplenishable asset. But money is a replaceable asset. Money is something that replenishes, right? So that makes time more valuable because of the scarcity factor baked into the concept of time. However, poor people with a poverty mindset, they keep thinking that time is money, and so they keep exchanging a large portion of their time for a little of someone else's money. And so because they keep doing that, they remain stuck. Time they would have invested in doing things that will generate wealth for them, they invest all of it in earning a little of someone else's money. And then when they get off the hook, instead of going back home to work on things that will help them generate wealth, they lie on the couch and they say, oh, I just want to sleep so I can go back to the job that I hate, right? They wake up every Monday, go to the job they hate, come back on Friday, and they do nothing about their future. They do nothing about their destiny. They do nothing about their creativity. They fail to turn their creativity to productivity, and from productivity to profitability. And that's why most people are broke and poor. Another thing I want to tell you about poverty is that poverty dies when multiplication begins. Linear earning is a treadmill. Escape begins when you multiply one idea to many assets and one message to many formats, one system to recurring outcomes. When God was talking to Adam, he said, be fruitful and multiply. Now, what does it mean to be fruitful? To be fruitful means to birth your brainchild. To be fruitful means to produce on the outside based on what has been put on your inside. Many people stop at being fruitful because they say, oh, I just painted this piece of art and it's beautiful. That's being fruitful, and that's good. But you can't stop there. You have to multiply that result. You have to distribute that result. You have to make it available in different formats, in different ways, so that more people can benefit from it. The more people you can impact with your fruitfulness, with your creativity, the higher the chances of breaking free from poverty and landing into the realm of prosperity. Another thing that I want to tell you about poverty is that poverty is a choice. That will shock you, right? Poverty is a choice, and poverty becomes a choice the moment you know the truth. The moment you know the truth, it now behooves you to decide whether you're going to stay stuck like Chuck in a pickup truck, or you're going to level up and tap into prosperity and crack the code of prosperity. And so the things I'm going to be sharing with you next are going to give you some really, really good insights on how to crack the prosperity code and make that code work for you. The first principle I'm going to share with you on how to crack the prosperity code is that you need to be excellent at solving problems. Is that you need to be excellent at solving a big problem that people care about. You see, most times people go about trying to solve a problem that nobody cares about, right? But you want to solve a big problem that people care about, and that's what Joseph did. He solved the problem that people cared about every time, the problems that made people sad. When he was in prison, he noticed that the butler and the baker were sad. He took interest in that problem and he made sure he solved it. He figured out what was wrong. He listened to them. He heard their complaints and he gave them an interpretation and he gave them clarity, right? As someone who wants to show up in the marketplace and create wealth, you want to learn to help people clarify their communication and create clarity for them with your communication. You want to be excellent at solving a big problem, and the only way you can do that is to be excellent at observing people around you. Be excellent at listening to the marketplace. Be excellent at feeling the pulse of the marketplace. When you obsess over the problems of other people and you pay enough attention to figure out where people are hurting, people will pay you attention. And so I wrote here, prosperity starts where your creative competence meets a real human problem. Name the problem in one sentence and design your assets around it. The Bible says something really profound. It says, I wish above all things that thou mayest prosper and be in health, even as your soul prospers. The soul is the seat of the mind, will, and emotions, and creativity is crystallized in the soul and then it's made manifest in a physical, in the body, right, in bodily form. But if the Bible says that I wish above all things that you prosper and be in health as your soul prospers, it means your prosperity is directly connected to your creativity, which lives in your soul or lives in your mind. And so you want to figure out a way to solve big problems with that creativity you have, because that is where profitability comes into the picture. When you match a problem in the marketplace with your creativity and solve that big problem with your creativity, then you are signing up for profitability, which eventually will help you generate massive wealth. Now, the next thing that you want to do is to understand the value of money. You see, Joseph understood the value of money. In fact, he understood what value exchange was all about. You see, one problem most people have that keeps them broke is that they think that to be able to make money, you have to sell something that is worth the money you are asking for. But that's not how it works. You want to be able to sell something that is worth more than the money you're asking for, at least 10 times worth more than the money you are asking for. That way, people are going to pay you. And Joseph understood this very well. He understood this when he went into Potiphar's house. He understood this when he went to prison. He understood this when he went to the palace. He understood it when he stood before Pharaoh and he gave his interpretation of his dreams. He knew and he understood how to position his value so that it is next to nothing. It is the most valuable thing around town. And this is something that you want to master also, because the moment you understand value, you will learn how to generate income, because money rewards outcomes, risk, and time saved. So you want to learn how to give people a big result, or you want to learn how to eliminate risk for people with your solution and with your creativity, and then you want to learn how to save time for people with your creativity, right? Another thing that you want to do is to master value exchange, right? So the previous one was to understand the value system of money. Now the next one is to master value exchange. Now the next one is to build for a global audience. Joseph saw that there was a famine coming. He did not just think of himself and his household, but he thought about the nation as a whole. He thought about the world at large. He thought about other nations that will be coming, and so he prepared food for all of this. Now it's interesting to know that when I studied the story of Joseph in the Bible, I did not necessarily see a place where the Bible tells us that God told him to recommend to Pharaoh that they should save food for 7 years. God gave him the interpretation. God gave him the gift of interpreting dreams, quite all right, but Joseph provided a solution more than just interpreting dreams. Now, interpreting dreams means analyzing data. It means diagnosing a situation. And Joseph did that already by the help of God. But Joseph took it a step further by providing real solutions, right? And by providing real solutions, he didn't just provide a solution for him and his household or for his nation. He provided a global solution. How are you making your creativity to provide global solutions and become globally relevant? This is something you want to lock in. This is something you want to dial in. If you feel like you're blessed with some gifts, skills, and talent, it is your responsibility to globalize that gift. It is your responsibility to put it out there in the world, because the more people you can serve at that level, the more resources you can command at that level. And so that's what Joseph did. He prepared for the nations. He prepared for a global audience. Now that brings me to my next point, and that point is that you have to master value exchange. Joseph understood the principle of value exchange, so much so that when the people were hungry, he knew how to sell them on parting away with their horses, parting away with their animals, parting away with their houses, just so that they can get some food. It was so bad that Joseph leveraged that principle of value exchange until they sold themselves to him as slaves. Can you imagine that? Now, this was a slave boy who was sold to slavery, and despite he was sold to slavery, he made something phenomenal out of his life. You may be listening to me and you're probably an immigrant, and you're wondering and you're thinking, maybe I can make it. Maybe I'm not this, I'm not that. Maybe I have XYZ challenge. Maybe my accent is an impediment. Well, It's only an impediment if you believe it is. It's only an impediment if you agree it is. It's only an impediment if you subscribe to the suggestions that it is. But the moment you take ownership and understand that nothing is a disadvantage to you, right? Even the disadvantages become advantages when you understand the power that you carry as a creative, right? And this is something that Joseph locked in. This is something that Joseph knew, right? Now, the next principle that I'm going to share with you from Joseph's life is you need to learn how to sell without selling. You need to learn how to sell without yelling. You need to learn how to sell without begging. And this was something Joseph did so well. Now, look at Joseph in the palace. This is someone that has been a slave. This is someone that needs a job so desperately. He needs anything that he could find to get himself out of this prison. In fact, he had already told one of the guys he helped, and he told them when they get to the palace, they should, talk about him and make recommendations and make referrals for him, right? But guess what? This was Joseph in the palace, and he was behaving as though he did not really need the job that he was being considered for. He told them, well, this is the solution. You can find someone else to become the administrator of this solution, but this is the solution. That is game changing right there. You want to learn how to disconnect yourself from the outcome of a sales conversation, because this is one of the big problems that most entrepreneurs are faced with. They are too attached, they are too connected to the outcome of a business transaction or a business conversation. It doesn't have to go your way always. It doesn't always have to end in a sale. It can just be a conversation that's still ongoing. Now, Joseph knew this, and he knew this well, and he baked it into his negotiation and his conversation with Pharaoh when he was proposing that they should do some saving, they should save some food for the famine, right? And this is something that you want to bake into your system, bake into your journey, bake into everything that you do if you want to tap into the prosperity that awaits you. And so you want to understand that your creativity is portable, and you want to package it for the places people already gather around the world in a digital first and time always approach, right? And then you want to sell without yelling. Like I said, you want to present your creative system so clearly that the room nominates you, and your authority is quiet but confident and is backed by competence, right? People begged Joseph to take their houses in exchange for food. They begged him to take everything they had in exchange for food, and Joseph collected it. So you can see that God has nothing against you selling. So if you're listening to this and you feel like selling is not your thing, you feel like selling is for people who are manipulative, then you need to think again, because selling is what makes the world go round. I'm going to leave it here for now. I hope that by these few principles that I've shared with you, you're going to unlock prosperity in a new dimension for yourself and for your family. And so I'll leave it here for now. Talk to you in the next one. Till then,